discussion and such. Thank you. So my name is Barry Kaslitz, and I'm on the steering committee of the Montgomery County chapter. And before we get started, just a few very quick announcements before we turn it over to Neil, our speaker for the day. And I guess first thing, just we've got 2 more meetings on the schedule for this year before we take our annual summer break. And the next meeting in April, on April 17th, I believe, 12th, April 12th, just in a couple of weeks. And it may well be one of the most important meetings we've ever had because both of our chapters are really in transition. A lot of people leaving the area or stepping down from positions. And we really need to have a good conversation about getting people to help out and take over new responsibilities and so forth. So that will be a very, very important meeting, and we really hope everyone can make that. And then on May 18th, we're doing our final meeting, be another virtual meeting to discuss communication access in healthcare, which is a very important issue for so many of our members. So those are the upcoming things. Do want to make a quick advocacy announcement from the Montgomery County perspective, something going on in the Maryland legislature. Last year, the Maryland legislature passed a bill requiring movie theaters that have a certain number of screens to provide, not only make sure all their closed captioning equipment is in working order and functional, but also to provide at least 2 showings a week of every movie that would be open captioned. And I know in DC, you guys have got a great organization that really advocates in the theaters themselves. And in Montgomery County, we're in Maryland, we're a little bit behind the curve, but we got the legislature mandating this. And that bill did pass. And at the time, it was theaters that have 8 screens or more. And in Montgomery County, certainly you have a lot of the bigger theaters do have at least 8 screens, but there are other parts of the state where you don't have, that's not as common. You have smaller movie houses. So this year, there's another bill that is hoping to extend the first law and build on it. It's already passed the House of Representatives and it's pending in the Senate. They'll be hearing on it next week. And that would do 2 things. First, it would reduce the number of screens that a theater can have down to 4. So if you have a movie house that has 4 screens, you have to show at least 2 open caption showings of every movie every week. And then secondly, and I think maybe even more importantly, this is something we talked about last year when we worked on the initial legislation, is our theaters just going to say, okay, fine, we'll do an open caption showing at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday when nobody shows up anyway, and try to get around the law that way. So this second provision of the bill that's in the legislature this year would require theaters to issue reports on exactly when their showings are. So it will be very easy to access, and we can look at the information and say, you guys aren't doing a good enough job here, and then go back to the legislature if need be and specify a little bit more what we're doing there. So anyway, that legislation passed the House and the Senate, so we're hopeful that that's going to happen as well. So that's all I had from Montgomery County. I don't know, before I turn it over to Rachel, I don't know if anybody, if Lisa or I want to jump in on anything else. Yeah.
I was just going to mention to build off of what Barry was saying about some of the transitions going on with both the DC and Montgomery County chapter. We're always looking for volunteers, and I know we've spoken with some of you already who have expressed interest, but the more the merrier. So definitely attend that program on Saturday, April 12th. But even before then, feel free to reach out to me or any of us if you have questions or if you'd like to speak about different opportunities for volunteering. We will be here to speak with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me briefly introduce our featured speaker for the day, Neil Snyder, who serves, as
Russ, can I say something before
HLA.
you introduce Neil? Not
Okay.
everybody is muted, and I have
Yeah.
the ability to mute them, but it would be best if you mute yourself because then you can
Yes.
unmute easily.
Thank
Sorry,
you. I
thank
think
you.
that's absolutely. Um, okay. As I said, our feature speaker for today is Neil Snyder, who is HLAA, the national organization's director of federal advocacy. Neil has a background of before joining HLAA about a year ago. He served for about a year on Capitol Hill and has almost 20 years experience as previously as director of federal advocacy with ASHA, the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Neil was diagnosed with hearing loss as a child. He now dedicates his work is dedicated to advocacy on behalf of people with hearing loss, moving important accessibility features forward. Academically, Neil holds a bachelor's in public administration from the University of Southern California and a bachelor's in political science and government from Guilford College. And he has completed the senior manager in government executive program at Harvard's Kennedy School. And with that, I will turn it over to Neil. Let me ask, Neil has asked, and I think it makes perfectly good sense, that questions and comments that you may have during his presentation, hold them until he's finished. There'll be plenty of time, to get them answered after he's finished. If you wish, excuse me, you can put questions in the chat box, and we'll go through the chat box, when he's finished. And with that, I'm going to say welcome, Neil. Thank you for doing this, and to turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Russell. Can everybody hear and see me okay? Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a very brief presentation. As Russ said, I'm the Director of Public Policy for the Hearing Loss Association of America. I'm the new Lisa, if that makes the association more clear. I'm hoping to fill our shoes and represent HLA and Americans with hearing loss in a sufficient manner. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about today is grassroots advocacy. And Brian, this hopefully dovetails in with your movie theater legislation, but let's see now. Is this not advancing? Oh, cool. There we go. You're probably familiar with grassroots advocacy, maybe through other organizations that you belong to. You may get an email asking to take action on taxes, movie theaters, closed captioning, national parks, historic places, and you put in your name and your home address, and it matches you with your legislatures. Well, beginning in February, HLAA contracted with the company and now can offer this additional feature with our advocacy. The tool we're using targets both federal and state officials. So depending on the issue, we can target the president, the cabinet secretaries, House and Senate. At the state level, depending on the state, we can target the governor, lieutenant governor, attorneys general, House and Senate, if they have two chambers, and other senior elected officials. The tool allows us to allow you guys to send emails, petitions, or do patch through calls. And of course, we can customize these messages for each issue and to make it look even more organic. The term is we can have multiple messages. So the recipients of any of these messages are getting slightly different communications. Yeah, why does HLA do this? Well, our mission talks about advocacy in addition to education and networking. This tool helps us to help you guys be more engaged in the public policy discussions. It empowers you guys, allows you to make the distance between point A and point B shorter, and helps with the issues that we're promoting. As I said, we've just rolled this out. We have two actions, as they're called, on our website right now, one federal and one state. They're not heavy hitter issues. They're more beta testing. We want to make sure that this tool works, that we know what we're doing, how it looks, how it acts, what the data is. But as we go forward, we'll be adding more issues both at the federal and state level. And hopefully we are working on some guidelines for our state and local chapters. So if they come to us and say, hey, listen, we need some help on making Labrador retrievers the state dog of Maryland, we can say, no, that's outside of our scope. But if it's a hearing issue, then we can say yes and make sure that we're being fair among the states and not having too many issues for one given state as at the expense of others. So you guys can take action now. That's the link. If you have a phone and you want to use your camera, that's the QR code. And what that does, hold on, let me stop sharing that screen. And that takes you to this webpage on our website. And if you scroll down, you'll see we have one federal issue and we have one state issue on Florida. And as we add more states, the look of this page may change because we don't want to list, we won't have 50 boxes with 50 pictures, but you would simply click on the Act Now buttons on each, and it will take you to a form. You can read that form. You'll be able to customize the message and hit send, and you've taken action. And we're excited about this. We really think that it's going to help the state and local chapters be more active. For instance, if somebody came to us and said, hey, we'd like help sending messages to Maryland state senators so that they vote in favor of a closed captioning bill for movie theaters, we could work with you guys and get that message up in a matter of a couple days. So we're going to stop sharing. So that's the new tool that we're excited about. I'm happy to talk about briefly what else is going on. It's a dizzying moment. I hate, that's a bad pun. I have Meniere's. I shouldn't talk about dizzying, but every day it's something new and it's purposeful to overwhelm the systems. Whether it's staffing cuts across the government or agencies or departments that affect programs and grants that affect the hearing loss community. I went to a conference last week, and when I landed, the president said he was going to cut 10,000 jobs from HHS. By the time I left the conference on Saturday, that number had doubled. to 20,000 cuts. There is a wave of retirements at the FCC. There's been articles about the brain drain at the Federal Communications Commission. There are cuts at the FDA. The FDA regulates hearing aids. There are proposed cuts for the Institutes of Health. And that would then trickle down to the Institute on Deafness and Other Communicative Disorders that does basic research on hearing. Of course, you probably heard about the $880 billion in proposed cuts for Medicaid programs. And depending on how that works in your state, I know this is Maryland and DC, but a lot of states use that money for pediatric hearing aids, screening programs, and other programs. So that may be affected. It's really hard to tell how it will play out in each state. There was a tiny little Department of Defense hearing restoration program run out of Fort Detrick, Maryland. It had been getting $10 million a year, 10 million with an M, for research to help with discoveries on how to mitigate hearing loss for active duty members of our military. Well, 2 Fridays ago, when the Congress passed the continuing resolution, the funding bill that funded the government through September 30th, they killed that program. So it'll be getting $0 for fiscal year 25. And the prospect doesn't look good for fiscal year 26. On the legislative side, and Lisa can talk about this, there's a law already on the books, the CVAA, that does a bunch of things regarding captioning and audio description and things like that. But there's a successor legislation, the CVTA, and we've revised it a little bit based on some things that happened at the FCC over the past couple of years. But a phenomena we're running into is that nobody wants to co-sponsor each other's bills. So the CVTA will be sponsored by Representative Debbie Dingell, a Democrat from Michigan. But we've had an impossible time finding a Republican co-sponsor. There are other bills across the board that are Democrat sponsored that they can't find a Republican co-sponsor. And it is almost the kiss of death if you don't have a bipartisan sponsorship, that bill probably will not progress. And it's been frustrating and flummoxing. And some of these issues had been bipartisan as recently as last Congress, but suddenly are no longer bipartisan in this Congress. So that's the 300 mile, 1,000 view of the world, and I'm happy to take questions on things that concern you guys. It's always good to hear from you guys because I want to make sure that we're focusing on the things that you guys care about. So thank you very much. Any questions?
If I could, Neil, first of all, thank you for that. One of the big questions I think a lot of us have is this whole assault on what has been termed DEI. And I mean, some of it just, well, I won't express my opinions on what I think is really behind a lot of it. But the question is the inclusion, which is the I in DEI. Is there any indication that that's going to include or address access for people with disabilities and reasonable accommodations and things of that nature? Because that's what those laws are. It's about including people with disabilities in the workforce and in other walks of life. And if we're really going to say, well, we don't believe in inclusion, is there a concern? Have we seen anything that would indicate that the whole idea of accommodations is under assault?
Um, I'm going to give a two-sided answer. Yes, there is an aggressive approach taken by this administration, but it's unclear what it will result in. Uh, uh, Practically everything has a lawsuit filed against it, but then the question is if there's a temporary stay or some permanent mitigation to the executive order, will he follow it? So it's really dizzying, as I said earlier, about what those things are. Uh, uh, you know, uh, it's DEI, sometimes the accessibility as well. So, we're watching the Rehabilitation Act and Section 504. There's some rumblings about that should be that scope should be narrowed and how it's applied. Um, uh, Lost my train of thought, but uh, uh, the other thing is that uh, uh, a lot of my colleagues were calling it the Control F process that Mr. Musk and his Doge staff are going department by department, agency by agency, with literally a list of terms. And we're literally using Control F on agency websites. And if those terms came up, those pages or programs would be flagged. And whether there was scrubbing of those terms or the removal of those pages or the permanent stoppage of grants or the restoration of grants, it's been all over the place. But um, uh, it's hard to tell, on the programmatic level, how some of these things will play out at this moment. It's just hard. Ken?
Ken, you have a hand up?
Yes. Neil, thank you very much for the presentation and the information. It's great and welcome. I have a question. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty going on right now, but does HLA, are they looking to target anything from a policy side or advocacy side that possibly might be, an opportunity here for, we're going to have a meeting in a couple months regarding medical accessibility. There's people on both sides of the aisle that it impacts them. Another thing that's really hot and possibly might be getting ready to explode is Oracast. And is HLA have any plans to get involved like they did with the loops, and they're still involved with the loops with Oracast?
Well, I can tell you, we've already done a number of webinars on Oracast, and I don't know if we have any more planned. We work with the Bluetooth SIG. We have an associated employee who works on the Bluetooth special interest group. We're monitoring it. We had an event at Samsung earlier last month. Samsung is one of the more progressive companies incorporating the technology into their products. One of the criticisms is that there's a lot of talk, but as a consumer, I don't see it. But that will be changing, I think, pretty rapidly over the next couple of years. Um, excuse me. Um, HLA tends not to endorse products, but Bluetooth is a technology standard that's out there. It's independently created and run. So we'll continue to monitor it, and if there's moments where our community is affected by it, I'm sure we'll interject ourselves. Sorry, my throat is getting dry.
Well, specifically, I had a question, with the Loop campaign, that really energized members nationwide to advocate to go to different places, libraries, churches, whatnot, to install loops. And it was challenging, but with the Oracast, it's supposed to be much cheaper and easier, um, and provide some real accessibility in a technology that's better than loops. That too might be really energizing to chapters.
We may. I haven't heard of whether we'll do a similar effort on Oracast. Uh, we still have our Get in Loop materials on our website. So that's not something that we're stepping away from. But uh, I think as a national organization, we're still a little bit, unsure of where exactly the effort needs to be put into regarding Oracast. There's nothing preventing you as an individual from advocating that your local sports bar or church or anything that maybe have multiple screens, your theater company from installing the product. Yes, in theory, it's cheaper. There's just not been a lot of examples of how to show that. There is a grant that was awarded to the Smithsonian and the Kennedy Center to test out systems. It was held up for a while because of administration edicts, but I think it's continuing to move on. It may be limited in one of the two settings, but I don't know if you also saw they just installed the technology in the Sydney Opera House. But I don't know who's gotten to experience it and whether they like the experience. And of course, that's in Australia, not here. So it's hard to say to your local community theater, the Sydney Opera House did it, why don't you? And again, it's the products are out there, whether it's converters for your TV sets or your PA systems. There may not be a lot of them. So I think it's difficult for local entities to know how to do this. My assumption is that probably over the next 5 or 10 years, there will be more middlemen who will help design and consult with local entities and say, this is what you need to deploy the system.
My impression is, one of the differences between loops and Oracast is that Oracast really is not available and won't be for a few more years. It's in part, yes, I think Ken is right. They're cheaper and easier to install than loops. At the same time, you also have to get people ready, to use it. And then that which brings, an anecdote to mind, a personal anecdote. I was in, a couple of months ago, I was in the market for a new hearing aid. And it occurred to me that, well, I should certainly get a hearing aid that includes readiness for Auracast, because presumably if I buy a new hearing aid, I want it to last for 5 or 6 or 7 years or whatever, during which time Auracast will be more widely available. At the same time, I wanted something that also had a telecoil, because that was immediately useful during a period of time when Auracast is not. And basically what I found was there's almost no such thing as a hearing aid that is both Auracast ready and has a loop. I'm not quite sure why that is the case. But, I mean, in my case, I mean, I've just sort of decided, well, okay, I guess I'll wait a while. I do have a hearing aid, which is functional and has a loop. But I'm not sure why the companies are not looking ahead and making these kinds of technologies available, both the service, of service presently, i.e. with a loop, and eventually with the capability of Auracast, which will be wonderful when it arrives. But it doesn't seem to be happening. I'm just wondering whether you had any information or
I
whether
mean,
anything.
it is just slowly. GN Resound uh, just launched their new Cadillac hearing aid. It does both Bluetooth, Auracast. It has a new chip that has AI technology and can better hear spoken words and give you better gain and better environments. Uh, it's it's great, but it's also an expensive hearing aid.
Yeah.
The
And
there's a I'm sorry, go
no,
ahead.
and even if it's Bluetooth enabled, you still need to have a Bluetooth transmitter at your
Yeah.
church or your community theater or your sports bar. And while that technology is out there, let me just give you the example of one of my favorite sports bars here in the DC area is the Crystal City Sports Pub. And if you're familiar with that, in the main room, there's got to be 40 large screen TVs. Um, I don't know how much a converter is, but I think it's around $150. So, that's a $5,000, $10,000 upgrade for that room. Uh, and does the owner want to do it? Is there enough demand for it? I think one of the with Oracast, I think one of the benefits though is that it's going to help everybody. Um, uh, if you have full hearing, you can't listen to your sporting event at the sports pub because there are 20 events being broadcast. It's just a cacophony of noise. But with Oracast, in theory, you'd be able to listen to your soccer game or her basketball game or their football game on your Bose earbuds or your hearing aid with a app on your phone.
There was actually a study that was done, and they basically indicated that there's a lot of applications for Oracast, but it's probably not going to take off until Google, Android, and Apple, they adopt it, and you're able to select which TV you want to connect to, or which gate at the airport, or the Oracast in your church or your meeting room. And Google just announced that they were going to do this, and like you, Neil, like you said, Sydney Opera House. And so with that movement, Apple, who knows when and if they're going to come out. I would assume they will, because it's universal for everybody. But with that, I guess, movement, that HLA might see this, because literally they're talking about this technology being revolutionary for accessibility.
I don't disagree. I don't know who's next. Lisa, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I have to note that somebody has put in a comment in the chat box, but I'm going to jump in before I recognize this person. Maybe Rush, you want to speak to it. But first of all, my understanding of Orcast, and it's been a year or more since I've looked into this, so it's possible things have changed. But in a situation that you were talking about where you had 15 screens, my understanding is that you would not need 15 different units to broadcast the Oracast, because what would happen is the Oracast, you'd have one unit that would give the person, and that's why Ken was talking about using a phone. So send a signal, send all of the signals to one phone. You choose which TV you want to listen to on that phone. Now, here's the key, though, and the other piece that you're talking about is the hearing aid itself must also, or somebody has to have a receiver that could be an iPad or, excuse me, iPod in their ear for people who are hearing. But for us, it would be a hearing aid or a cochlear implant. Now, Russ, the other thing is the hearing aid and Oracast. Now, when I left a year ago, what we negotiated was that 85% of the models that are produced by a hearing aid company must include telecoil, and that 15% of the models would provide Bluetooth of some sort. We did not say just Oracast, it had to be some sort of Bluetooth. So the thing is that you should be able to find more than one model that has both a hearing aid, both has telecoil and some kind of Bluetooth. Again, I can't promise that would be Oracast. But the other piece that makes it complex is that your hearing loss, you may be only able to find the models that didn't have Oracast in it. And the models, as people have been saying, are coming out. They're new with Oracast, and it's going to take some time to roll out. But you should be able to find both because we negotiated that. That's in the rules now for the FCC. And hopefully, and I'm hoping, Neil, you said that a bunch of people are leaving the FCC. I'm really hoping that the Office of Disability Rights holds strong there. But of course, we don't know unless if people are leaving, migrating out, that's an issue. But you can go to that office and get clarification on that. And you go to their website if their website is still good. But anyway, yeah, so look around. I don't want other people to be discouraged. You should be able to get both because we knew there was going to be a transition time. We knew we weren't going to just flip the switch and all have Oracast. So we knew people needed that telecoil connectivity. So my expectation is you should be able to find it if you look at different models. So we have to see. And now, Russ, I'm sorry, go ahead, Neil.
And what I was talking about and what I predict is that if you're an establishment that has TVs now, you will have a choice of replacing that TV with a Oracast enabled TV or buy a adapter, which may be more less price inhibitive. So if your sports bar has 5 TV sets, it might be cheaper for them to buy 5 adapters and then get that one device that connects the 5 TV sets to your phone or iPad or ears instead of buying 5 brand new TV sets. I suspect that as establishments replace their TV sets, the salesperson will say, "Hey, listen, you need to buy the new model with the Bluetooth because it's great and fantastic." And if people are advocating for this at the local level, I would hope that they don't advocate for it strictly on a disability accessibility level. In theory, it's going to help any listener at an establishment better connect with what is being broadcast. And I think that will resonate more with establishments uh, and if you want to say, hey, listen, I've got 5 friends with hearing loss and we don't go to your sports bar because we can't enjoy what's going on. But if you got this technology, we could. That's 5 more customers. If your five friends have perfect hearing, but like 5 different sports, you can also enjoy the sports bar better because you can listen to that sport. I don't know if you heard about silent discos. I envision a day when you might walk into a sports bar and it's completely silent because everybody's listening to their different game or program through their earbuds or their hearing aids, and that you'll have spontaneous bursts of cheering when your soccer team scores or the other person's basketball team scores because you're listening to it on different channels.
That should be a goal, to have a silent disco at an HLA convention.
I'll talk to our conventions and meeting people.
I'd like to mention somebody has put a piece, I don't know how you want to handle that, Russ. Somebody has put some comments in the chat.
I see the question. I'm not quite certain how to respond. Careers in education and health can also have a disability.
Yeah, there is a comment, in the chat box. Let's Rose, do you want to talk to your comment? I can read it, but you may be able to describe it more.
Sure. So I currently live in Arizona, and I used to live in DC for many years. Might be back eventually, but we shall see. But anyway, I'm still part of this group because I find that you guys have the best information. Anyway, so I am concerned about just the future in general terms. I find that right now I do have some supports because I am an audiologist part-time and then I'm a teacher full-time. And I am just concerned with the way things are going. Like, are my students going to be able to have their supports that they need? Not even the ones with hearing aids and those without hearing aids that need hearing aids. Because I'm a teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing, and I'm really worried about myself and then also my students and then other people that I know with hearing loss, because it's very disruptive. And I don't really know exactly like how anyone can answer my question, but I'm just wondering, like, I mean, I'm doing everything I can by calling the senators and my state representative and things like that. I'm not calling, I'm emailing because that's easier for me. But I'm just concerned, and I'm just wondering what else I can do to try to help the situation not get too far out of control. Like, I feel like it is going in that direction.
I think you're doing a great job, and I would continue it. I would encourage you to get more people involved, whether it's other teachers or parents involved. The federal government does fund accessibility programs, but a lot of those programs are then operated and administered by the states, and each state does it slightly differently. I'd be concerned that states, in the name of efficiency, may simplify programs to the point of saying that, we provide cart services. Isn't that enough? And you have to remind people that different hearing needs need different services. But yes, it's going to be a challenging time. And as I said earlier, Medicaid, though it generally affects low income, it does covers disability programs, but then they're administered in different states. And that battle is going to happen at the state level. I also would not be overwhelmed by the size of the cut, the $880 billion. That's a number that they need to make the math work in Washington, but that's in theory that's cuts over 10 years. Um, uh, 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 so there, in theory, is the opportunity to change those cuts in 2 or 4 or 5 years and restore them if they happen. You can again write your legislator and your senators now about not making cuts. Um, it's I would suggest to stay focused though. Part of the strategy of what is going on is to do a lot of things everywhere and overwhelm you both emotionally and politically. So find out what is near and dear to your heart, focus on that, and advocate on that.
Thank you.
Vera, you have a message in the chat box. Do you want to talk about it? Vera, are you there? Well, I will read the message. It says, what about governments and ORCAS, airports, government meeting rooms and auditoriums? Should all have ORCAS. Can HLAA help with that?
We will try. As you may know, the Federal Aviation Administration authorization bill passed last year. There are provisions in it to improve the traveling experience from curb to plane for people with disabilities. So that's physical disabilities, sight, vision, and hearing. The question now is how aggressively will the FAA act on implementing those provisions? This was a bill signed by President Biden, but the provisions will be implemented by President Trump. I am less optimistic of a aggressive rollout schedule by this administration. So we'll work with it. I serve on a couple of governmental advisory boards, disability advisory boards and committees. But there's been zero activity with them over the past 3 months. We've not been asked to attend any meetings or provide any feedback or seen any proposed schedules for feedback. So I don't know how much of that is normal transition between one administration and the next, or is unique between the last administration and this administration. So I'm aware of it. Again, I would say that if you are really a fan of HorrorCast and you want to see it, I would act locally. Work with your city council, see if they can get the city council chamber to have HorrorCast in it, so that more people can hear the city councilmen talk about zoning issues. I've asked here, and I live in Alexandria, and I don't think there is a single looped government building in Alexandria, but was told that there are other accommodations. So it's frustrating. We here in Northern Virginia do not have a HLAA chapter, and it's motivating me to explore possibly starting one so that we can get more facilities, whether it's looped or ORCAST. So start local, start with one entity, so that, and I think that's really important. If you can demonstrate how it worked at your local restaurant or sports bar or church, and everybody can see how it can work, other churches, other restaurants, other sports bars, other community theaters will do it too, because word will get out that I'm a big community theater fan, but I can't enjoy it at community theater X, but community theater Y has ORCAST, and I can enjoy it there. And that's gonna event. I think that's when the ball will start rolling.
So implementing something like that, exactly what you're talking about, wouldn't that be a role for HLA? I mean, that's basically what they did with loops.
It would, and it could, and it should be, and I'll take it back.
I'm reminded that I think it was New York City, but I'm not sure of that. Which basically a few years ago decided, that no, they couldn't. They certainly can't mandate the inclusion of loops in privately managed facilities. But what they can do is determine that you're not going to get city financial help unless you provide it, unless you incorporate that technology. And I'm wondering, is that a useful way of inducing local government local government agencies, to provide a certain amount of encouragement for the incorporation of Oracast technology in public facilities.
It could if it works. I don't see it working at the federal level, at least for the next 4 years.
No. I guess one of the things that sort of struck me was because this was local. I mean, some of the nonsense going on in DC now, would not necessarily affect the local entities, just as, New York City, I think it was New York City that did this on their own volition.
But my argument is that if you articulate to a business entity that by deploying this technology, they can have a broader customer base and a more satisfied customer base, and that's the reason they should deploy this technology. They should listen. If you tell them that they have to because we're telling you, I don't know how much support you will get.
Yeah.
I think what Rush was saying, though, this is Lisa, that how it was phrased is if you want a city government contract, you must comply with accessibility rules. So it applied to installation in their city council and places like that. But also, for example, Strathmore in Maryland is a quasi-governmental, and they took money in, but they're not accessible because we did in Maryland as well. And Barry's here also, he was part of this, that we called it a loop law, but essentially the language of the law does not preclude something like Oracast, but it was the same kind of idea that if you want a contract through Maryland state, you have to comply with this accessibility rule, which is making it accessible to a direct connect to your hearing aid. Here's the problem, though. In New York City, there's a very strong advocacy group. In Maryland, what happened is we created an advisory committee, and it was slow as molasses. It was really hard to move the administration to acknowledging the need. In fact, what was really amazing to me is that they had government buildings and they had an ADA checklist, and somebody who went to these contractors and said, you must fulfill these things. And they never included hearing accessibility in those contracts ever, even though the ADA applied. So changing the mindset, I think Neil is right. You need to advocate locally. You need to get your people locally involved in order to push any kind of advocacy. And going back to a chapter to do it locally or getting a bunch of friends together who say this is a good thing is a way to do it that makes it actually more impactful in some cases, because the national office can have a policy and say, yes, we are for this, but really the boots on the ground is where it happens. So that brings me to why I raised my hand. Let's go back to your toolbox here with the advocacy toolbox. I'd like to be a little bit more clear on how it works. Is it so you have federal ideas, which so I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm seeing, what I believe I understood you to say is the federal issues, the national office will take care of. You'll post issues that you're working on and you need our impact, and you'll send out, send letters to your senator or whatever it is. Local issues, though, it's not like they have the software you're using doesn't have a way to pull out local issues that have to do with hearing loss. There's no algorithm that pulls it out. Right. Okay, good. So I'm understanding correctly. So what happens is
We're
you're
dependent on you. We're dependent on the chapters and state
to come to you.
to come to us and say, Maryland Bill 222 is a good thing or a bad thing. Can you help us? And we'll reply, give us some content, because there are fields and that we need to fill, because there's a landing message, HR 222 will mandate closed captioning in theaters everywhere in Maryland. And then we'll craft the message, and then we can push it out. We can have it listed on our website. We can have it hidden on our website, but give you the URL so that it's on your website. You could post it on your website so that it's a uniquely Maryland thing, and you can promote it based on our CRM, our membership database. We could push out an email to those people in our database, but that may not be everybody in the state, and it may include old names or duplicative names. But it's a very basic tool at the moment, but no, it doesn't. We couldn't afford the Cadillac version that tells us that somebody in Idaho introduced a bill that would do something horrible. We just don't have that ability.
Okay, so the next question for me is, so when you then send, so Barry sends you a note and says that we really want to work on this captioning bill, and you look into it, he gives you the context, and you send it to our database. But does that mean that people don't opt into these messages, specifically advocacy messages, or do they get it just because they're on the debate database?
I think the answer is yes. Our website, this tool is not behind a firewall or password protected, so anybody can come from anywhere, HLA member or not, and click on the button and send a message. We can promote it if you're in the HLAA national database. We can share the URL with the Montgomery County chapter, and if you have a list, if you want to print a URL or QR code and staple it to lampposts, you can. The only cap is that the contract is for 10,000 individual users. That's our only limit, but that I think would be a blessing too if we had 10,000 active users.
Okay, thank you.
Neil, I have a comment. I think it's important to. There's one thing that's important to understand about Oracast, that the way it's being sold, that let's say, for example, you want someone with hearing loss wants your city council to adopt Oracast. They already have an existing PA system. They will approach them. And for this person with hearing loss, for them to get the signal, they have to have Oracast hearing aids. That's a cost. that they have to incur. They also need a phone to be able to, an Apple or Android that has the ability to connect. But what they're pitching is there's a PA system that's already installed that you can put, like you said, like $150 adapter that will broadcast that. So if a member can somehow demonstrate the experience that the person with hearing loss would have if they spent $150 and they experienced that aura, that clearness, it's not unreasonable. It's not like a loops where it's thousands of dollars and it's tearing up the room and stuff. It's literally can be, if our members demonstrate it, as easy as plugging in an adapter.
Right. I think the barriers are the how much it's deployed and how well people know about it. I don't know if you went to your local Target or Best Buy or Walmart and walked in and asked the salesperson, do you have an Auracast enabled TV, if they would know what you're talking about.
No.
Or if they had an Auracast adapter for your current TV, I don't know if they would know about it.
Well, we
And
got a long ways to go,
right,
and we're not there yet.
But these products are available out on the internet, and if you know what they are, then you can get them. I don't know if there are dozens of them or if there are just a couple companies. There should be more and more companies that have this. The technological standard is out and established. It's just a matter of the companies adopting them, educating their sales force, whether Samsung government sales people are telling Alexandria City Council that when they upgrade their TV sets that they should have this feature. But it would also help that if you went to the Montgomery County Council and said, hey, the next time you upgrade your TV sets, you should do this, Strathmore, you should do this. And the thing is that, if it's only one or two companies at the moment, HLA can't endorse a product. So if there's only one product, it would look like an endorsement. We can endorse the concept and the technology, and encourage you guys to do your research and do your shopping. But whether one adapter is better than another,
well, anything that basically transmits audio is supposed to be able to easily have an adapter from mass transit to anywhere, to TVs, to Apple products. I mean, can the tool that you guys just developed be used not only for legislation, but to get our members to write Samsung, Apple, all these people that and ask them to please adopt Auracast and demonstrate there's a demand?
Well, so yes, in theory, it has a petition feature, but that's kind of a passive tool. We could create a petition, and you can get 10 people to sign it, 100 people to sign it, 1,000 people to sign it, but then you would have to deliver it to Montgomery County officials and say, look, I got this many signatures, please make this happen. That's in theory how this advocacy tool works. And if that's what the Montgomery County chapter wants, it's one shot, not that we're going to limit it to one issue, but if that's the most important thing, the petition for Auracast, come to us. But I've been trying to make it clear, at least within the national office, that we're not going to go into Montgomery County and tell Montgomery County officials what HLA thinks is best. If you think that this issue is the primary issue, then you can come to us and we can help you based on the aspects of this tool that we have and what it can do, what the best option is.
I think it makes sense, that national HLAA national organization focus on national issues and local issues, we handle in other ways. I mentioned the New York City example of a local initiative. Again, one other, and that was right here in DC, sometime around 2018, 2019. We became the local chapter, the DC chapter, became discouraged by the fact that the National Book Fair, which was an enormous event held at the DC convention, probably draws over 100,000 people over the course of a day. The systems set up for hearing accessibility were very poor. And we did push them, and they did redesign the systems. I mean, we weren't talking about Oracast then. This is, 6, 7 years ago. I'm sure I never heard of Oracast, and neither did them at that time. But they did. We did provide, enough push, to get them to do some fairly significant redesign of their systems. I have to confess that I don't know how well it worked or continues to work. Because, of course, what happened was, yes, they agreed to do certain things, and that we mutually talked about. And then COVID came along, and I confess I haven't, wanted to visit an event, where there's 100,000 plus people, crowded into an auditorium since. And of course, it hasn't been nearly, that large ever since then. But there are opportunities, at a local level, which may make a good deal of sense, particularly given all the melees at a national level. Which is affecting, I'm sure, as you're indicating, Neil, a lot of the advocacy work that we would, at a national level, would like.
Well, let me share with you a funny, sad, ironic story. I was at the American Academy of Audiology conference, and there was a woman in attendance who was invited to go to Sydney. Some company was gonna pay for her airfare so she could attend the unveiling event. But she, I believe, is maybe a bilateral cochlear implant user. So she asked if the unveiling event was going to be accessible, and she was told it wasn't going to be accessible. And so she didn't go to Australia. She didn't want to take the 14-hour flight to an event that she couldn't enjoy about Oracast at the Sydney Opera House. So as you can see, there are still many opportunities to screw things up, even if you're meaning to do well. So I just wanted to share that story, that even the smartest minds and the well-meaning intentions can fall flat. Ken, you have your hand raised?
No, I'm sorry. My apologies. I'll put my hand down.
Are there other questions, comments from others for Neil?
Yeah, if I could throw in one or shifting directions a little bit here. Insurance coverage of hearing aids. I've always sort of thought that the holy grail would be Medicare coverage for hearing aids. And a few years ago, we actually came pretty close. Lisa did some great work and almost got it on Capitol Hill. The deal just kind of fell apart at the 11th hour. But a completely unrelated issue, a year or so ago, we were able to get the Maryland State Legislature to add hearing aid coverage to the health insurance programs on the exchange in the state of Maryland for adults. I think we're one of the only states in the nation that have adults and a lot of kids. And one of the keys, I was talking to the legislator who sponsored the bill, and she said one of the keys was convincing her colleagues that it would actually could be a cost savings. And this was really based on the Johns Hopkins study that showed dramatic increases in hospitalization, emergency room visits, length of hospital stays for people who don't have hearing aids. Now, obviously, right now we're kind of in a defensive posture, and well, should be. We need to protect things that we have. But I was just wanted to get your thoughts on the idea of pitching Medicare coverage not as something that an added benefit that something people hearing loss need, but simply as a cost savings. If we could actually demonstrate that Medicare bills costs would actually go down if people got hearing aids, you think that would fly? And what would be a good way to approach that?
If we had accurate current information, it would help immensely. Um, if the correlation was specific to hearing loss and not multiple factors, wealth, diet, age, it might be harder to prove. Also, a state may look at things like savings. The federal government may not. It may just look at the cost side. And sometimes that sticker price shuts people down. The Medicare coverage bill is waiting to be introduced, but again, they're trying to find Republican co-sponsors, which has been hard because it will not go anywhere. And if I can, since I have you on the screen, I'm not on, this is a tangential thing. I'm not on every chapter's mailing list, email list. I'm on some, the email list that I am on is growing. But when I see an exchange about a state issue that I can grab onto, I have state issues queued up and ready to go in this advocacy tool based on the information I'm able to research. But have not waiting, but trying to coordinate with those states to see if they want additional help. You had a colleague in New Mexico who had a closed captioning bill that we were aware of. I created an action for it. But when asked if they wanted to use that action, they declined because they said the governor wasn't going to sign it, so there was no point in wasting our time. So that was a lesson learned. I have a shell of a one created for the movie theater one in Maryland, but I don't want to be the arbiter of whether it's a movie theater issue or OraCast petition that you guys want to focus on. But and it's also and I'm fully aware that you're just learning about this tool, so you didn't know to ask for help. But I'm trying to let you know that this tool's out there and to tell your chapter partners and friends in other places that it's out there. And to go to the website and look at the Florida one. It's a pretty basic one. You can go through every step. You could even put it in your name and Maryland address. The tool will not let you send an email because it doesn't have a Florida zip code. So it will tell you at the end that there's no matches for your address in Florida. But you know, if you've got family in Florida, you could use their address and send a message. But hopefully, as the awareness of this tool gets out there, we'll be able to help our state and locals more and more. And hopefully, in a couple of years, I expect that we'll have a couple of years of trial and error. That we may get overwhelmed with requests. That there may not be a consensus locally about what issue they would like to use the tool for. So I would ask for your patience, but if there is a consensus in Maryland, let us know. We can't, in theory, though, there is a petition tool. We've not done a petition yet, so I don't know if you guys could do a petition to Montgomery County because that's a local entity and this tool doesn't have the local database. But I don't know if the petition would still allow you to collect names and signatures on a generic topic and then present that topic to whomever you like. But I would love to try it out with somebody and see how it works. And then we can better educate our chapters on how that feature works. I can watch YouTube videos and tutorials till I'm blue in the face, but the petition feature, I'm not 100% sure how it works.
Neil, I have another quick question about Oracast. The Bluetooth website, bluetooth.com, I think, they have a lot of materials, information, marketing, YouTube videos, and they have some videos of them actually going to conferences, conventions, and demonstrating, connecting to a TV, just the experience of experiencing Oracast. Are they going to be at the convention this year?
I believe so. I don't know if all of the convention will be Oracast or there will be certain rooms that have it. I know they're going to be there. I know they demonstrated it in the exhibition hall with kind of a one-on-one feature. I've been to a couple of events now where it's been demonstrated, and it's great and creepy at the same time. I was at an event where it was in a large room, and there were in each corner of the room there were people having conversations, and those people were mic'd, and you could put on. They had Bluetooth-enabled hearing aids that you could borrow. They would give you a phone that had the intermediary app on it. And if you wanted to listen to conversation A over in the left-hand corner, you could do that. And if you wanted to switch to conversation C in the corner behind you, you could do that. And it was fantastic, but yet again, kind of creepy how you could just drop in on these conversations from clear across the room. The AAA conference had, where did they had it in one of the hearing aid companies had a special event, and they had it in that room for that event and did a similar demonstration. I don't know if it was available in others. I went to the technology show in Las Vegas, and there for one day there were 5 or 6 presentations. So there was and it was the Oracast track. So each presentation, you could either borrow a hearing aid or earbud or muff and connect to the speaker on stage.
So I guess my question is not that it's going to be installed at the convention, but are they going to have a booth so you can actually talk to them about this?
I believe so. They were there last year. I don't see why they wouldn't be there this year. I can double check and let you know. I don't know who's vending or exhibiting at the conference.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, from for Neil?
I know that we run into similar problems that you would run to, that we would like to do it. The Bluetooth people would like to do it, but it's then finding a local vendor who has the local equipment to set it up. And I think that was the last thing I heard. That was the hurdle that we were trying to solve. I think somebody is coming in from Chicago, is the closest vendor to Indianapolis to install the equipment.
But Bluetooth SIG Will they?
But
Will this company have, or will they have a booth?
I'm 99% certain that the SIG will be there.
Okay, excellent.
Okay. Someone's got a hand up. Let me see.
Ken still has his hand up, so I think we've
It
taken care
still
of Ken.
can.
Yes.
Ken, do you have something else, or I mean, I don't see other hands up at the moment.
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Please
Thank
hear
you.
it. Okay. Well, I mean, if there are no further comments or questions, I mean, we will conclude, I guess, a little early, which is fine. But not before I say once again, thank you so much to Neil and also to Lisa Johnston, who provided captions for us and as usual did a superb job. So I will say, any further closing comments from Rachel? Rachel, any
No,
closing
no,
comments?
thank you so much.
Okay, any closing comments, announcements and so forth from Montgomery County? Well, okay, thank you all,
I
for
just dropped
coming.
my email
Okay,
address
sorry.
into the comments. I just dropped my email address into the comments in case people want to reach out or share.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. And I see let's see, there is one more message. But let me see if I can find it.
I think it's a thank you, Russ.
Yeah.
Okay, is that from you? Vi? Okay, fine. Well, listen, thank you all for coming, and if there's nothing further, we'll close the meeting at this point and enjoy the rest of a beautiful day.